It was a fact that the wedding between Armani and Brandon had taken place despite the fact that an entire kingdom was against it. They were attacked, judged, and both suffered strong emotional blows, which they were able to put aside in order to continue with the plan. Although, for Brandon, that plan was his dream come true, only that if the feeling was not reciprocated, there was nothing left but to accept it as just that, a plan. On the other hand, the marriage as a kind of plan also benefited Brandon, who besides being a romantic, was also a man passionate about his kingdom and his territories. His marriage to Armani being he the head of the kingdom of Lam, and she the supreme ruler of the kingdom of Ekon, meant a more than privileged positioning for both kingdoms, as well as an increase in power. It could be said that Ekon and Lam were now one, and the dark beings of Ebom had no choice but to hide and recognize. Brandon and Armani, during their wedding night, did nothing but plan strategies, possible laws to be established, and even vague sketches of educational and military buildings for young scholars and possible soldiers in the service of the new Union of Kingdoms. Of course, this was a different life for Armani, being that she was attending the University of Magic. Now her life has deeply changed. Now her dreams are beginning to manifest. She has gained the power that she has decided and manifested, and now she is now bringing it into manifestation. In Brandon's head, though, who although he denied it to himself, was still in love with Armani. Even though he hid his love from her, he was afraid to let her know how she felt. There were somewhat daring actions that he wanted to carry out, but seeing the level of commitment and concentration that Armani was employing in the conversation following their marriage, he desisted. However, he did not feel disappointed, as he felt quite good realizing that Armani was not the same as she had been a year ago. Now she was even more down to earth, especially in terms of character and attitude that one should have to be in front of a kingdom. Brandon feared for the fact that he may have to be the one to shoulder the responsibility of both kingdoms when he had only recently become accustomed to carrying the burden his father had left him. I am surprised, Armani. You have become a very capable and dedicated woman. I like your ideas as much as I love you, Brandon said, looking at her, searching with his eyes. But there was no emotional response, only, "Thank you so much, Brandon," Armani said. "I know he will be able to make this alliance one of the most powerful in the world and honor the memory of our elders and ancestors," Armani replied, ducking his eyes and pretending to pay close attention to the sketches on the table in Lam's castle room. As the exchange of ideas between the two went on, Brandon noticed how Armani was constantly leaning on one idea as if he wanted to impose it, but couldn't bring himself to do so. She also seemed to be looking to make something clear to Brandon, but she wasn't making it up front and was resorting to detours. Armani, before the law and the gods, I am your husband, and now Even if you do not love me, I respect you as a woman and also as my queen. So whatever you have to say to me or even impose, as long as it's in the best interest of the alliance, you can do so with complete confidence. Brandon had lifted Armani's face with the finger of his right hand. Tell me, he added in a sweet tone. Armani swallowed thickly, smiled, and cleared his throat. Thank you so much, Brandon. I must thank you for your support, your understanding, and your presence whenever I needed it, she added, taking Brandon's hand in thanks and giving a smile to the king, who seemed to feel entirely satisfied. And yes, there is something I would like to make clear from this very moment, when we are just beginning to lay out the foundation upon which the monarchy alliance will stand. It concerns the women of both kingdoms, said Armani, who was already beginning to adopt a more serious tone of voice and expression. Is something going on with the women of the kingdom? I feel they are protected as they should be. They enjoy all the privileges and have the absolute support of their respective kingdoms so that they can fulfill their duties at home and in simple jobs, replied Brandon, without understanding too much what was going on or what Armani was referring to. That's precisely the problem, Brandon. I don't want women to be seen that way anymore. Not under my rule. Not as long as I draw breath. And your answer makes it very clear to me that I must start working on that as soon as possible, since if you, being the king, hold that opinion, I'm sure the rest of Lam, as well as the other Ekon mandarins, hold exactly the same opinion. If we, who are the representatives, do not understand that there will never be change, Armani's word had force, but Brandon didn't seem fully understanding the angle she wanted to show. My queen, I understand you, but I'm afraid, not fully. Explain yourself in detail. From this moment on, I'm all ears, replied Brandon, taking a seat and pointing to the chair in front of him, right behind Armani, inviting her to sit down. She looked at him and cleared her throat. Okay. This is my vision for the kingdoms, our kingdoms together. I want the women of Lam and Ekon to have the same hiring opportunities, the same privileges as the men in all aspects. That includes military, political, and acceptance into all fields of work, as long as those women have the capabilities, are pre-tested through an aptitude test, possibly slanted toward the discipline they seek to inspire. Basically, that's what's going to happen, Brandon, Armani concluded, starting at Brandon's expression, seeking to reduce whether that had convinced him or whether he had doubts. Brandon kept his expression neutral for at least a minute, time which Armani understood was pertinent for an immediate response, as there was quite a bit to analyze. I'm not going to lie to you, Armani. It's a drastic decision, and it's something that has never been done before in either realm. Brandon had stood up and walked to the window. A couple of seconds later, he turned suddenly with a slight smile on his face. But it's not impossible. Besides, I like it, for it sends a clear message of equality, a new equality, a new alliance. Those words lit up Armani's face. It lifted her spirits. Then she knew that Brandon was able to connect with her vision for her kingdom, for the future. Both newlyweds continued to discuss that topic, and bedtime came without them even being able to notice it. Night fell. Brandon offered to pick up the mess and asked her to go to sleep. "Brandon, I plan to create an army of women, more powerful than ever before. These women will be able to stand up for what they believe in without the oppression that they've been through for so many years. They're no longer going to be treated like second-class citizens. Do you understand me, Brandon?" Armani said, about to leave the room without turning to look at him. Brandon, who was picking up the sketches on the table, stopped suddenly and looked at her. Said army will be made up of the most battle-hardened women of both Lam and Ekon, she added, and without looking at him, continued on her way, straight to the ladies' room and then to bed. Armani fell sound asleep. She was so exhausted. And after an indescribable darkness, a flash of light shook her reality. She was standing in what appeared to be Ekon's training yard. In front of her were about 40 women, equipped with armor, some leather, some plate, some chain, swords, and shields. The women in only one of the training lines were dressed in robes and held a staff. "Excellent! Begin!" shouted Armani, as if the women in front of her had just compiled with one of her orders and knew exactly what their next move should be. At that moment, the ranks of women turned and began to fight each other in what appeared to be an large, furious training bout. Shield up! In their main element of protection, down is not useful. It's useful where it can keep them from getting killed, Armani was saying, as she walked, constantly analyzing each sharp way they held their sword. She analyzed the way they were holding it and how they were fighting. Around what appeared to be her female students, the robed women took their distance by a couple of long backward leaps and began casting spells at each other. Dodging or activating a protective spell? Big unknown. The answer? Whatever the opponent allows them to do. If the spell is very fast, but rely on dodging it. But if it's a powerful low-speed spell, a good magic protective shield is more likely to get them out of the predicament. Armani was not neglecting her spellcasters. Finally, the workout was over and the girls were exhausted. Very good, ladies. Today, we have continued to improve. The next appointment is tomorrow. We are getting closer and closer to our goal. What is our goal? Asked Armani, raising her sword energetically in front of her army. Destroy the evil Ebom resistance, answered the army with overflowing momentum and ending with a great war cry. At the moment, Armani noticed the spirit of her grandmother Isabel in the crowd. She looked at her smiling, murmured, "How Grandma Isabel," whispered, "You made it, my child," to which Armani nodded, holding back the tears of happiness in her eyes. Little by little we have decided that the false image the population had about us, we are not just housewives. We could not remain inside our homes with no purpose, being treated like second-class citizens when our muscles could also wield a sword with righteous strength for our kingdom. Our magic, in combination with the strength of our spirit, could also raise a great magical defense or throw a ball of elemental energy on the target that threatens our peace. It was unfair, and we have changed it. Now we must prove day by day that we're right. Another enthusiastic war cry originated in the training yard, and during those seconds, Armani observed over the crowd another familiar figure. But in this case, it was not her grandmother's spirit, but it was Jake, her eternal, forbidden love. As he stood there in the yard, his wings black and upright, his eyes like raging fire, and handsome as ever. She constantly thought about Jake. She could never get him out of her mind. But now, she knows that she is married to the King Brandon. Jake knew he couldn't be there, so Armani was more surprised than usual. Deep down, she wanted to see him. But if his army observed that she had some kind of relationship with none other than the prince of the enemy kingdom, she would lose all credibility. She knew this, so using his demon wings, he raised himself just a little to get his beloved's attention and then disappear. Armani would know where to look for him next. We're done for today. See you tomorrow, same time. Get some rest, Armani ordered, and when all the feisty women had disappeared, she left the training field and full speed in the direction of a small natural path formed by vines and long trees. That place was a few meters behind the royal castle of Ekon. The words were over, and the greeting between the two lovers was dictated to the rhythm of a passionate kiss. "You're going to kill me with a heart attack. You know you can't just show up." "Jake? That so suddenly, without warning me first," added Armani quickly when he was able to detach himself from Jake's lips. "I know. I'm sorry, but it's urgent. The resistance in my kingdom is ready to attack in a minimum of 2 days, Armani. I came here as fast as I could after I heard about it. I overheard Emily, my sister, telling one of her henchmen they will board Ekon during the night. They will attack head-on with everything they have because they plan to take them by surprise. It would be a crushing defeat for you." Armani seemed to lose track of time. At times, She found it hard to focus on what Jake was telling her, but quickly resumed what she believed was reality, now with renewed determination. "Then we'll be ready," she said, looking down at the ground with anger in her gaze, as if she wanted to personally go to Ebom and extradite the enemies. "I will stand by your side, Armani. I don't mind being exiled completely. I haven't felt like a member of Ebom for a long time. I simply cannot connect. I don't share their ideals. I can't be cruel. You showed me how to love. You showed me the deep connection, the love that you have for me, and I you. I'm not able to do it. And that's a basic trait in my race, is to be cruel, but I just can't." Jake, who could take the form of any human he wanted, thanks for his genes, preferred not to do so and show himself to his beloved Armani as he was. His figure was intimidating, but his look and words were sincere. Armani no longer had any doubts of those words that came from him. It did nothing but comfort the new queen and filled her with a renewed courage. "We will certainly need your help. Jake, tomorrow you will come here. I will present you to my army," Armani said decisively. Jake's eyes widened in surprise, but he knew it was something that had to happen, so before replying in any way, he nodded without further ado. The next day, Armani stood tall before her army. "My queen, is something wrong?" One of her soldiers asked her. "You'll find out right now," replied Armani, scowling at her. "Get back into formation," she added, walking her piercing gaze over each of the women in her army and clearing her throat. "You are not just my army. You are my family. You are my greatest pride, the best defense of this kingdom, and the reason I went through all that I do to become a warrior queen you have before you is because of my deep love for my kingdom." As Armani released her speech, the women of the army began to change their expression. They murmured at the back of the formation and showed genuine concern. "The resistance attack has been brought forward. We will be attacking tomorrow. By tomorrow night. I learned this from a very good source, as I have been in contact with Jake, the Prince of Ebom." Armani blurted it out, and just like that, she stood erect, adjusting her steel breastplate with her chin up, waiting for criticism and objections from her army. "For we must prepare for the attack. It is a blessing that we have been warned by that man, though I find it hard to believe that this Jake fellow is betraying his people," said one of the army sorceress. "How do you know we can trust him, my queen?" Another question came from the crowd. Yes, they were security questions, but nothing further from what Armani expected, such as a rebellion of them turning their backs on him. "I am absolutely certain that we can trust my informant, and you must trust me with your help. We will slaughter our enemies by soaking our swords in the cursed blood of unwanted and impure creatures." "It's as simple as that," Armani said, her gaze full of determination and thirst for battle. The women in front of her swallowed thickly, stood firm, and one of them took a step forward. "We're with you. Whatever happens, you're not only our warrior queen and our commander, you are also our liberator. Before you made a point before the other rulers to give us a chance to serve our kingdom. We were oppressed, deprived of our freedom of action. We were not mistreated, but we were marginalized, limited as endangered creatures. Well, some of us were mistreated. You noticed that. You not only showed us freedom, you gave it to us. That's true. So you can count on us to stand up to that scum of the earth. My sword and shield are yours, warrior queen." Those words filled Armani's eyes with burning enthusiasm. Quickly she raised one of her hands, that being the signal for Jake. "Those are the words a warrior says. Now it's time to introduce you to our ally from the enemy side," Armani added. Standing firm and with a stern expression, the expression of a warrior satisfied with the loyalty and strong strength of her army. Above Armani, a shadow began to form. It was Jake slowly descending in his original form. Wings, horns, long sharp fangs, exposed scarred torso, and blood-red eyes. More than one woman in the army brought her hand to the tip of his sword. Armani wanted to react, but Jake stopped her. "You should know that the attack has been brought forward again. I guess Emily found out about my meddling and moved her plans forward. I fled as best as I could, and they didn't want to risk following me due to the lack of organization. But they'll most likely be here, Armani." "In a minute," Jake said quietly, and then turned to look at the entire army. "I know I look like the enemy to you, but I am not. The enemy is my people, my family, who also became my target for a reason too momentous to explain right now. I am a spy against my own people. There is no time. The attack has been preempted. The entire rebel army of Ebom is headed here right now. The wolves, vampire, lesser demons, and multitude of ravens will flood the interior of this realm shortly. So the question is, will they let me fight alongside them?" asked Jake firmly as Armani raised his guard and looked every which way. Something with Armani's perception of reality was off. She seemed to be getting lost or finding herself. Before the army could answer the question, the numbers were huge. These red-eye wolves began to emerge from the ground, some with riders on them. "They're here, attack," ordered Armani, drawing their sword and severing the heads of a pair of wolves, and didn't even manage to open their jaws. Blood stained Armani's breastplate as well as part of her face. Jake rose to the heights and began to fight with a pair of demons that tackled him. The army began to clash their swords against the claws of their enemies. Strange, extremely old-looking subjects stood at different points, forming a square. From each point, they began to deploy dark energy that spread over the sky, creating a kind of magical night, giving way to the ascent of vampires from the underground. Some turned into bats and empowered the attack of the crows. Armani began to run, zigzagging every which way while throwing small daggers she brought in a leather pouch attached to her belt. They come to my land to set up an artificial night to carry out their attacks. They will pay dearly. I will see to taking their lives. Armani didn't miss. Each dagger impacted a bat or the heart of a rising vampire. Jake couldn't help but feel proud of his beloved evolution. Armani's permissive character had been molded and adjusted to battle, and in that way, in addition to being queen of the alliance of two kingdoms, she was also a relentless warrior driven by the desire to safeguard her kingdom and her own. Armani, take that! Tossing a sword to Armani, now the warrior queen possessed too. A smile that served as a prelude to victory was plastered on the face of the warrior queen, who began to decapitate demons, vampires, and other creatures in her path, in a relentless frenzy, dispensing justice by the sword, painting the battlefield floor in crimson red. Armani! The vague trace of a voice, adjacent but not visible to her, caught Armani's attention. She turned to look at Jake, but he was too busy decapitating a pair of demons with a sword he had received from one of the women in Armani's army. It seemed to be coming from another place to Armani's ears. She would try to ignore it and order her sorcerers to conjure up a group spell and formation. She ordered the warriors who positioned themselves behind her, establishing a triangle formation. Armani being the top, atoning a war cry, they all advanced towards the enemy, slaughtering much of the resistance in the process. Only the vampire and wolves were left standing to do battle, both on the ground and in the air. The fight was still going on. Jake managed to join back with Armani on the battlefield and said, Armani, if we emerge victorious from this battle, I want you to know that, Armani. This was Brandon, the king's attempt to wake Armani. Honey, wake up. You're having a nightmare. From the prolonged sleep he had been having had paid off. I'm sorry, but you were getting too agitated. I thought I should wake you up, Armani, from this nightmare. Although before you woke up, you seemed to have calmed down. Brandon added, while disoriented, Armani was just thinking, organizing her thoughts, and trying to discern, where the hell is she? Wake up, and realizing that she was dreaming.